Welcome back to Grandstand Therapy. I am your host, Lori, and today we are going to dive into the Australian Grand Prix. And let me tell you, we walked into this weekend with lots of questions, and we walked out of this weekend with still more questions. So hopefully we will continue to get answers to some of these questions as we evolve in this season. First, I would like to talk about the fact that we as Americans got new ways of viewing F1 content. So we now have Apple TV. And I previously, over the last several seasons, have been an F1 TV subscriber. So I didn't know how it was going to work. I still get my Apple TV now and my F1 TV. So that's awesome. And when I first started watching this sport, I really wanted Sky Sports and could not get it, sadly, in America. So F1 TV, finally we were able to get it, and that was awesome. And now I can get it all, which is fantastic. So you can watch Sky Sports on Apple TV broadcasting. You can watch it via Apple. You can watch F1 TV, and you can also log into the F1 TV app. If you don't have the F1 TV app, you get it for free with your Apple subscription. You can just log in and get that. If you're not sure how to do that, it's very simple. There's lots of YouTube videos on how-tos. I'm not going to go into that here, but I will say coming into this weekend, I was curious to find out how it would be watching all of the things. And it was awesome that I had so many choices, and I'm still playing around with it, but I liked that I could watch the pre and post shows with Sky Sports. I felt like they gave a little bit more insight. Like, for example, during the pre-race show, the Sky Sports commentators were inside the Cadillac garage. That was awesome to be kind of like along with them for the ride. And then also following the race, they also were walking around with, spoiler alert, the winner of the race, Russell. And they were like, it was like he was on the broadcast with them. So that was really cool to see. So I liked that. And then I also like to be able to go to the F1 app and watch the race through. You can use multi-view, so you're able to watch like drivers' onboard cameras. And you can also geek out really and look at data if you want to. And then you can also watch the race. So a lot of that, I just like the options. I really did. So that was awesomeness. I liked that going into the weekend. Okay, so we're just going to kind of dive into kind of the highlights of the weekend and some things that we got answers to maybe the questions throughout the week following this race before we head into our next race coming up this weekend in China. So coming into Australia, we already kind of knew, obviously, that Aston Martin was struggling. They didn't even know if they would complete any laps or how many laps they would do. They may do the formation lap, and that was it. They kind of came out in the press conferences on the media day on Thursday before the race and said, Fernando Alonso said that he would not be able to complete more than 25 laps, I believe, due to having permanent nerve damage in his hands and his feet. And then Lance Stroll said kind of the same, that he felt like he could maybe do 15 laps. I'm like, good God, we came from this car maybe not surviving to the drivers now having nerve damage because it's shaking so bad. So that was, wow. So I really hope they figured this out. And then also, excuse me, we had Lewis Hamilton in the press conference this week, and he was beaming. He was smiling, happy. He said that the car had his DNA all over it. He was excited. He had no idea. Like, I think a reporter asked him, like, can you believe it's your 20th year in this sport? And he said, I really can't. He just seemed like he had life back in him, which last year was so hard to watch him. So I am super excited that he was in a positive mindset, really optimistic, really just ready to get out there. So that was good to see. Oscar was in the press conference that I watched as well. He said that he felt like that the McLaren and the Red Bull were probably behind a bit from the Mercedes and the Ferrari. And of course, we had the Mercedes. Russell and Kimi were just beaming because we already know they have a fast car. So that was kind of what we took away from the press conferences. So then we get into practices. The practices, I mean, I'm just going to kind of cut through to practice 3 because that's where kind of the real stuff started to happen. So in practice 3, I would say before practice 3 sessions started, they came on and said that the FIA had decided after meeting with the drivers and teams the day before after practice 2 that they were going to remove the straight mode in one of the turns, and I cannot remember which turn, so I apologize for that. But they were going to remove the straight line mode because they felt like when the wing closes, because the wings, remember the active aero, front and rear wings open, they felt like that it was a safety concern with the amount of downforce that when the wing collapse was providing, is kind of what I got from it. They were very vague about it. That they just kind of came on in practice session 3, and said that never mind, the FAA has decided to not do it. They're going to just wait because they had a lot of pushback. Some teams wanted to keep it in because they felt like they got it under control. They had practiced with it, and other teams were still against it. So they decided just to reverse that and make it the way it was. Okay, I was like, what was the point in telling us all that? But either way, that was kind of the starting of the drama of session 3. Then in practice session 3, Kimi Antonelli wrecks his car into the wall. Ouch. But it wasn't just a wreck, guys. It destroyed the whole back end of that car. I mean, the rear wing was gone. I wouldn't say the car was in two, but there were pieces all over the track. This was 2 hours before qualifying. There is no way that Mercedes is building this car back together 2 hours before qualifying for the amount of pieces that were out of this car. However, so we get into qualifying sessions. So in Q1, Max Verstappen, guys, goes flying across the gravel. We didn't see it live because we weren't on board with his car whenever he was completing his lap. All of a sudden, we see yellow flags come on screen, and then we see Max Verstappen replay of flying across the gravel, almost hitting the wall. It was as though he was going 80 miles an hour and he pulled the emergency brake like in an old car, and it just slid and just went flying. I mean, we all know Max Verstappen is not doing these kind of mistakes, so something had to have happened with that car. So it has come out that according to Racing 365, they did get some inside comments from the Red Bull camp. I don't think Red Bull has not come out, to my knowledge, with a blanketed statement, but they have said that the software began to glitch when reading the engine speed and the motion transmitted to the rear axle during downshifting. Especially in combating the abnormal number of revelations, the system went into safe mode. This caused the engine to break interval and immediately caused the rear axle to lock. That's scary stuff. So he was a passenger in this car. It's just the computer software did not recognize it and just threw the whole rear axle into lock. That is scary crazy. So he is completely out of qualifying 1 session, which though did gift Mercedes a time to get Kimi Antonelli out on track to do qualifying, because it got red flagged. They gave them more time to fix the car. And so he was able to get out and do a lap and stay into qualifying. We did also had Carlos Sainz didn't get out of the garage for qualifying either. There was an issue with his car. So in the end, we'll just skip to qualifying. In the end, let's get to Q3. Q3, which is your top 10 shootout, of course. Kimi Antonelli had gone into the garage towards the end of the session, and he came back out, and they had left the cooling fans on his car. And they, of course, fell off onto the track. And then, of course, Lando Norris runs over them. So that sends debris flying everywhere, and so they have to red flag it again. And Lando comes in to get his tire changed. They knew he probably had some front wing damage, which he did. They couldn't change his wing out completely because they only had so many for the race weekend. So they selected to try to just adjust it, fix it the best they could, and he went back on track. So, of course, that affected his qualifying session, and he could have done better. I mean, I would say it reduced it a lot considerably a lot. So in the end, we had Russell qualify on pole, and then we had Kimmy P2, Isaac Hadjar P3. Amazing. I was so excited to see that. That gives me great hope for the Red Bull new engine and Isaac's performance. That's fantastic. Following up with Leclerc P4, Oscar P5, Lando P6, Hamilton P7, Liam Lawson P8, and Limbad 9, and of course rounding it off with Bortoletto. Another thing that was awesome is Limbad, brand new rookie, just started, came in V carb first year in, and he's already qualifying in Q9. That's fantastic. So we'll talk more about Limbad as we get along into this debrief, let's call it. So as we get into the race, I had written down a few notes. So there's something that we're going to hear a lot. So I thought I'd bring this up first, is we're going to hear super clipping a lot. So the cars are super clipping, and super clipping is where the drivers lift and downshift on long straights. So in other words, the long straights in the past, they've been able to go flat out. So in other words, their foot all the way against the throttle, just flat out. But now they can't do that because they're having to harvest that energy back in through kind of like lifting and coasting, let's call it, or downshifting, however they can do it to get more energy generated in that car in order to finish down the straight. So that's what we call super clipping if they're lifting and then downshifting. Also, Melbourne track is one of the worst tracks they probably could have started on, because it is extremely difficult to get a lot of energy off of this track. In other words, it's a lot of straights, a lot of long corners, not very many straight corners. Again, we're having to harvest a lot, so you can't really harvest as much on the long corners as you could on these short corner tracks. So this is the worst one on the schedule. There'll be some more down the pipes, but this is definitely probably the worst one they could have started on. But either way, it was on the calendar. Also, something that came out is the car. This was very interesting. The car is learning based on the previous lap. These cars have an AI software, and what it's doing is the drive it's learning each lap time as the drivers go around the track. The drivers can control some of the components, such as the overtake and boost, but the software is handling the deployment. I don't know how I feel about that. That the software is handling the deployment of the battery and the energy that it's producing out. I'm not quite sure how to wrap my head around that yet. So that's going to be continued as we get into this season. I'm going to keep my mind open. I know it's different. All right, so then let's get into the race. Okay, so before they get to the starting grid to line up to do their formation lap, they always go out and do, I call it a practice, a little run around to kind of like test out the waters, let's call it. You don't got to be super clever, do crazy stuff. But again, it's a way for them to kind of get their feet wet, let's call it, before getting to the starting grid. So they go out to do these, and Oscar somehow just all of a sudden he's in the wall and out of the race, and like instantly. I mean, my heart just sank for him. This is his home race around his home fans. He's got entire section of Oscar fans that are there for them. My heart broke for him. So, I mean, we didn't really know. He did say that he felt coming out of the pits and out to the track that he didn't have hardly any battery was coming. It was low battery. And then as he came into turn 4 and into turn 5 and then into turn 6, that's kind of when the incident happened. He felt like he didn't have any battery in there, and he barely put his foot down on the throttle, and all of a sudden he felt like he had 100 watts of energy, and he just lost control of the car. So was it driver error on Oscar's part? Was it the car that he couldn't control with deployment and low battery? I mean, that is still a question mark. I guess it could go kind of either way depending on how you look at it, but either way, that is heartbreaking for Oscar. So I felt really terrible for that. All right. So Audi also, Hulkenberg was not able to start the race either. He had a problem with his radio. He had no radio, and normally you might say, well, we've had a race last year where I think Alex Albon had a race where he had no radio and he came into the pit and was like pointing down to replace stuff. But in this new, I just told you, it looks like that the system is deploying energy for you. You got to have communication with your teams. Otherwise, you're really driving blindly. So anyway, he didn't start the race. So that was sad for them too. Okay, so let's get into the start. So we all knew the starting procedure was going to be changing. We now have the blue light, kind of like 5-second buffer, let's call it, for them to spool up their engine, their turbos, to get them spooled up enough to be able to launch off the start. So you can hear them all circulating, and then the lights go out for them to start. I do feel like the lights went too fast, and I do think that they maybe need to work on that start, which I do think they will. So, of course, instantly, and I mean instantly, those Ferraris were flying past the Mercedes and had a great start. So we end up with an exciting start with Russell and Leclerc back and forth. Leclerc's in the front, and then Russell passes him, and then Leclerc's in the front, and then Russell's in the front, and then back and forth. That went on for quite some time. Max Verstappen's in completely the back of the field. He started from 20th. He slowly starts climbing up the ladder, and he goes basically in 13 laps to P6 right behind Lando. So that's kind of where that progression was there, which was great. Makes me wonder if he would have qualified, how that would have went, because Hadjar qualified P3, so who knows. So then let's get into the heart of the race. I really enjoyed it. I didn't know if I would, but I will tell you, I enjoyed the racing. I felt like the start was great. It was fun to watch those first, I would say 18 laps. There was a lot of battling back and forth. So on the start, they go back and show us the replay, and there was a very scary, what could have been a disaster happen at the back of the pack. Liam Lawson stalled out, and he was at P, I want to say 9, 10, 8 when he started, but he got pushed back because his car stalled out. Calipento in the Alpine was right behind him, and he had to think quickly or he would have slammed into the back of Lawson. I mean, it was like the curtains opened up, and suddenly Calipento was just, I got to make a quick, literally millisecond decision, or I'm going to put it in the back of his car. He somehow squeezed between the wall and there and made it through, only to get a collision, causing a collision penalty down the highway. But good job from him. I felt like that was like my MVP of the day, maybe. I don't know if I'll go that far, but either way, the starts definitely have to be looked at, because that was kind of crazy. Fernando, who, said during the beginning of the race that his Aston Martin, was going to cause him nerve damages, he somehow managed to get up to P10 in that first few laps. So that was awesome. So then we get to lap 11, and Isaac Hadjar's Red Bull DNFs. I mean, you see smoke coming out of the engine. I'm like, oh my God, no. That was heartbreaking for him and for all of us Red Bull fans, including myself. So that was heartbreaking to see that happen. And it sounds like engine failure. They haven't given us more information than that even to this point. So that's what it sounds like. Other than that, okay, so that brings out a virtual safety car during that event. And so the Mercedes decided to come in and change their tires. They had started on medium tires. They decided to do a one-stop strategy, and they came in and they changed their tires to hard. A lot of the other field members did as well. However, the Ferraris decided to stay out. Granted, it was lap 11. There's still lots of race time left, and I think they were trying to do a two-stop strategy. So they stay out. That puts Leclerc in the lead and Hamilton behind him. And then the Mercedes come out, and it goes along for a while, and you think, maybe Ferrari's got this and not Mercedes running away with it. However, of course, the Ferrari strategy calls come in, and they aren't great. So lap 18, we have another yellow flag come out. Bottas in the Cadillac stalled. I guess it I don't really know what specifically happened, but his car kind of starting to stall out. So he kind of pulls over, but it is in front of the pit lane. And they throw out the virtual safety car. At that moment, they threw out the yellow flags. We know that a virtual safety car is coming, or safety car, because he is right next to the pit lane. That is a safety concern. So we know that was going to happen. But Ferrari did have about a 10-second window to pit before that happened. And they were in sector 3. So they weren't far from the pit lane. They could have made that call. Even Hamilton himself came on the radio and said, "Are you not going to pit either one of us? Because, and they said, "No, we're going to stick with our strategy that we already had." So they didn't pit the Ferraris. So then, of course, a virtual safety car does come out, and so nobody can go into the pit lane because it's closed. And during that also, I want to bring up is, so these drivers now have new, let's say, features. I wouldn't say they're features. They're really just a tack to be able to deploy their battery more. So the boost button, the overtake button, it's to be able to get more energy to overtake the person in front of you if you're within 1 second of them. So there were several drivers that were within that window right before the virtual safety car was thrown. So in other words, if a yellow flag comes out and there is going to be a virtual safety car, they need to use all of that battery up, like completely all of it, and deploy it so that they can get maybe even a position ahead. Because once the virtual safety car comes out, they can't overtake it under virtual safety car. So I'm not sure why the strategies, it was the first race. Maybe hopefully teams will go back and look at that and see that they could have done that. All right. So, other than that, I kind of feel like it was, I felt like the beginning was exciting, but then once the Ferraris did not pit, Mercedes was just able to run away with it. So Russell wins the race, Kimi Antonelli gets P2, and Leclerc gets P3, which I was very happy about. But I do think that here's the thing. Ferrari, if they would have pitted, they still would have came out 3 and 4, regardless. So I don't know why they didn't try to pit one or both and see if they could have gotten better ahead. They were really relying on the fact that those hard tires weren't going to hold up, but they could have tried at least with one of them and to see if they could have gotten ahead of the Mercedes. So that's my only red flag of the day. All right, so that's kind of it for the race. Then let's get into the after the race chatter, let's call it. So Max Verstappen was asked afterwards in the media. Now, we all know Max Verstappen. He's not afraid to speak his mind. It's not because he's rude. It's because he's Dutch and he's not afraid to speak his mind. And he's earned that respect to be able to speak his mind. He wasn't the only one speaking up. Lando Norris was also speaking up after the race and saying that we have gone from having the best car to the worst car. Then we've had Ollie Behrman come out and say it was a bit like driving in a video game. We've had Esteban Ocon has made those kind of same comments. We had Liam Lawson make those kind of comments. We've had even Hamilton, even though he was excited about this weekend, he did make those comments. We had Leclerc come on with a funny comment that it's a bit like a mushroom in the Mario Kart, game. So, they're all making these comments. So Max was asked, what was your verdict on this race and going from 20th to 6th place? And he said, for me, I passed a lot of cars, but we were still 2 seconds faster than those cars. And I don't really know the word to use. And then he was asked whether F1 should be worried about the racing. And he added, I am reading these because they are direct quotes and I don't want to get them wrong. I think that they should be worried about all the rules. They ask a lot of questions. I give my opinion on what I would like to see and what I think is better for the sport because I do care about it. I love the racing and I want it to be better than this. He adds, let's see what we can do. I hope that during this year, we can come with some different solutions to become more enjoyable for everyone. I think that FIA and the F1 are willing to listen, but I just hope there is some action. I'm not the only one saying it. A lot of people are saying the same, be it the drivers or the fans. We just want to be the best for the sport. It's not that we are critical, just be critical. We are critical for a reason. We want it to be Formula One, proper Formula One on steroids. But today, again, that was not the case. So that is how I feel too. So props for Max for speaking up. And that is kind of why I said we are walking out of this race with still more questions, because there are lots of things that do need to be looked at. There's got to be ways for them to make it a little bit better and more enjoyable. There's some safety concerns, such as Max's rear axle locking up randomly because of a software issue. There is deployment of energy, like Oscar experienced, that came out of nowhere. He felt there is the Max rolling up to the starting grid. We kind of already knew this was going to happen, but he's rolling up. He again started 20th, so he's rolling up to after the formation lap to start the race, saying he has no battery. Liam Lawson stalling out because that issue. There were a lot of drivers that said they had no battery at various points, and that can be dangerous. I mean, it can. So there are lots of things that they need to look into. I do think that it sounds like the FIA is listening, and they are going to wait for the next after China before maybe going into Japan to see what maybe they can do about it. China is a completely different track coming up this week. Granted, the run from the start to the turn one is atrocious. It's a very long straight. They might all lose batteries before they make it to turn one. However, the rest of the track has lots of short corners, and so therefore they'll be able to harvest more. So there is going to be a different type of racing going on, different types of ways of harvesting and deploying the battery in China versus what we experienced in Australia. So it sounds like they're going to give it a couple more races, and then they're going to kind of see how it evolves and then make a decision on making some rule changes prior to going into, say, Japan. So that's kind of how it sits, and that was kind of my takeaway from the first race weekend. I am very, let's call it optimistic. I do hope that they will be able to tweak things to make the racing more enjoyable for the drivers, more safe, and make it still enjoyable for the fans to watch. Of course, I did think it was entertaining. I did like it. It did feel a little bit too heavy on the battery driven, but we are stuck with these cars till 2030. So it's not like they're going to go and put new engines in them immediately. That's not going to happen. So maybe we can find a happy compromise. So that's my hope. So that's kind of all I got for this week. So going into China for this starts up this next week. I am thinking it's a Ferrari win. I really do. I think that they're going to have it. They were almost there. And if they can get their strategy calls right, I think they can make that happen. I'm interested to see where Red Bull qualifies. I do think the McLarens are going to take a bit to get up to step. With the McLarens, I think it's this. I think Lando and Max weren't going anywhere. And once Lando was in P5 for the majority of the race, Max, once he caught to Lando, he stayed behind Lando at P6 for the rest of the race. They both were within 50 seconds behind the Ferraris and the Mercedes. So it's going to take a bit, I think, for those two teams to kind of get things working. The McLaren, while they do have a Mercedes engine, it's their customer, which means they're not the works team. So they're pretty much like, here's your engine, go figure out how to make it work for your car. It's like giving you a piece of furniture to put together without instructions. Their engineers have to figure out how it's going to work for their setup. So it's going to probably take them a little bit more time to build on that. And so I do think hopefully as we move along in this season and it progresses that we get a little bit more competition and it's not just Mercedes running away with it. That is my hope. So thank you for joining me. If you have any comments or questions or things that you would like me to bring up or cover or things that I've said that you would like more things on, just please comment below. I'm happy to answer those questions for you. I appreciate you joining me and I look forward to China. See you next time. Bye.